Hi, this is Dr. Fox, licensed psychologist in the state of Texas, and in this video, we're going to discuss toxic relationships. When you saw the topic, you probably thought I was going to talk about only interpersonal relationships, and that's the relationship between you and someone else. But I'm not. I'm also going to talk about intrapersonal relationships. This is the relationship you have with yourself. And I think you'll be surprised how similar in pain and process these two aspects really are. So let's get into it, and like, share, and subscribe. And here we go. Relationships can often feel like a double-edged sword. You want to be close and open, but you're afraid to, so you push the emotions and or the other person away. But when they start to dissolve or step back, your rejection sensitivity gets activated. And this is followed by fear and frustration, which causes you to engage in those maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns that keep your BPD symptoms in place, keeps them active. So we want to go, whoa, right? This cycle will tire you out. And I'm sure that you've experienced that, right? The back and forth, the push-pull relationship cycle. I have a video on that. And just how exhausting that can be time and time again. And over time, that push-pull pattern can turn the relationship you once had so much hope for into a toxic one. And this isn't just an external issue, but an internal push-pull relationship with yourself that happens as well. And that is what we call toxic. It can be an intrapersonal toxic relationship or an interpersonal toxic relationship. And you can have a toxic relationship with yourself. And before we talk about how to deal with it, let's really get into and see what it is, because that's really, really important. And generally, a toxic relationship is one that makes you feel unsupported, misunderstood, demeaned, or attacked, right? And essentially, it's any relationship that makes you feel worse rather than better. Now, do we think this is only external and cannot be internal as well, right? That's definitely a no, right? It's definitely both. Now, I'm going to talk about the 10 common factors that makes up toxic internal and external relationships. Now, I want you to grab a piece of paper. I want you to draw a line down the middle. On one side, I want you to write me, M-E. And on the other side, write the name of the person you think you're in a toxic relationship with. As I go through these 10 common factors, I want you to write in the me side or the other side, or even both columns, right? Because you can have it both, right? You can have it on both sides. You can have an internal and an external toxic relationship, right? And what this exercise is about it's building really good insight. And this is a good exercise to help you do that because it's so important for us to build insight into relationships, particularly for those people that have BPD, because sometimes the need for those relationships and the dependency cycle is so intense that sometimes people are like, yeah, it's a toxic relationship, but I'll be in it anyway. And sometimes what happens is that can really feed this negative feedback loop. And that's what we don't want to do. So we're going to build insight, we're going to help you out, and we're going to get into it, right? So let's get into it and let's foster knowledge because we know knowledge is empowerment. All right, let's get into it. Number one, and this is a lack of support. This is not supporting yourself, and others don't support you either, right? That's that internal and external component. And it's important to have both in a healthy relationship. In those toxic ones, it is that lack of support that you experience, right? So if you have that internal, as it relates to me, you know, right? The me column, right? Then you would write one, lack of support. If you're in a toxic relationship with someone else and you don't feel that sense of support, right? Lack of support on the other. So you can have it on both. You can just have it on one, either side. Number two is a toxic communication. And this is saying mean and discouraging things to yourself and others, saying hurtful comments or judgments. Now think about that, right? Is that I think folks with BPD tend to have this internal dialogue that is fed by what's called this family in the head. And it's this toxic communication you have with yourself. But externally, right, that interpersonal relationship that you have with someone else Is that toxic as well? Are you guys really kind of mean to one another? Are you discouraging with your partner? But it doesn't have to just be your partner. It could be coworkers. It could be friends. It could be family members. Remember, toxic relationships isn't just romantic relationships. It can also be family, friends, coworkers, any kind of relationship that you may have. Now, number 3 is resentment. Yep, you can resent parts of yourself as well as other people in your life. Showing bitterness towards these other people show bitterness towards you on a routine basis. But are you showing bitterness towards yourself as well? Do you resent yourself for various aspects, right, of how you live your life, how you are planning your life, the regret you may have for things that you did or didn't do? And that can be an intrapersonal component. An interpersonal component, right, would be with your significant other or anyone you have a relationship with, and that you have this resentment towards them. Now, next, number 4 is dishonesty. This is lying to yourself and others. Others being dishonest with you, right? That would be that interpersonal. So you would write dishonesty, right, on either column. And it's so important for us to be honest with ourselves, what we really want. And I think that a lot of folks with BPD contend with this dishonesty because they don't feel worthy of having an honest sense of value and an honest communication with yourself. And honest communication isn't just identifying the positive and ridiculing yourself for it. No, right? I'm going to tell you to stop that right now. Honest communication is a combination of the things you do well and the successes that you've had, right? And noticing some of the things maybe that you didn't do well, some of the things that maybe you've done or are doing that don't make you feel good about yourself. That's part of that honest communication. But toxic relationship with self or other is dishonest, and we want to be honest in that component, right? Now, number 5 is patterns of disrespect. This definitely relates to yourself and others, right? What fosters your self-respect? This could be saying no when you mean no. And I think a lot of folks with BPD often say yes when they wish they had said no, right? Or know that they're going to get themselves into a negative situation, but they say yes in order to try to please the other person, right? Or they're afraid of that rejection, sensitivity, abandonment, then possible ensuing emptiness. So they say yes in those situations. And we don't want to do that. You want to say no when you mean no. You want to say yes when you mean yes. That's part of self-care, right? And it's also respecting yourself. And then we have to ask ourselves about those interpersonal relationships, right? Relationships we have with others. Are you treated with disregard and contempt by that other person? Because that's a component of toxic relationships. Number 6 is you feel unsafe and don't trust yourself or the other person. And this is so central because I think that it is one of those inherent components to BPD that doesn't get talked about a lot. And that is that you don't trust yourself, right? We go back to some of those other components, right? That you don't honestly communicate with yourself. You say a lot of negative things to yourself. You don't support yourself. And that BPD, that feeds that BPD, right? That maladaptive patterns. And we don't want to do that. So then it creates this feeling of feeling unsafe, right? This lack of safety. How about with your interpersonal relations, right? With your significant other, with your coworkers, with your family members? Do you feel safe with them? Can you trust them that when you're down, they don't kick you when you're down, that they try to lift you up, that they're able to see the positive in you, right? Because that fostering that sense of unsafety, that feeling of unsafety, I'll get it, right, is really toxic. And it can certainly be with yourself and with others. Number 7 is that you feel neglected or exploited by your own actions that encourage your self-perspective of low value, and the other person treats you and supports this negative aspect of yourself, right? So you already feel negative, right? You feel exploited inside, right? And you encourage this low value, again, with those other things that we've talked about. That's that not feeling safe, that disrespecting yourself, being dishonest with yourself, that you resent yourself, all of these things. And then we end up saying things that encourage us, that keep these things really solidified inside you. What about in those relationships, right? Does the other person say things, do things that creates this sense of feeling neglected and exploited and treated unfairly, and that those negative aspects in you are constantly brought up, constantly identified, even when you succeed, even when you do something well. They're like, well, I mean, but you remember this failure and this failure and this failure. Okay? That's a component of a toxic relationship. Now, the next, number 8, is you feel lost. You don't know who you are. Now, this can often be a reason you attach to someone else and you resist that sense of self-exploration. Sometimes we're afraid of what we may find if we stop and look at ourselves. But it's really important to do that, to genuinely and honestly explore yourself, what's important to you, what your values are. And you try to define yourself through someone else. And this is one of those classic symptoms of BPD, which is that unstable self-image, is that you're not really sure who you are. So again, you go back to that old pattern of attaching to someone so that you'll have a sense of self. But that sense of self can't be external. We have to stop and we have to explore ourselves and know what we believe. And I know that can be scary, but it is so, so critical to do that. And number 9, and this is you feel belittled and ashamed. And you do this to yourself through negative and toxic self-talk, right? And you are spoken to that way by the other person in the relationship as well, right? So you belittle yourself, you shame yourself, right? And you create this shame spiral for yourself, and you just shame, and it's intense self-shaming that other person in your life kind of grabs onto, right? And they're like, oh, let me shame him or her. Because when you feel low and you feel little, then you end up capitulating to what that other person wants. And number 10 is that judgment instead of open-mindedness. And when you think or hear something, right, you attack it as though it's stupid, useless, or proof of your ineptitude. And what that means is that you do that yourself, not just that other person, but you're doing it to yourself as well, right? So if you think of something different, if you hear something that's out of the ordinary or that may encourage your sense of growth, you dismiss it and you say, well, that's stupid. You would never be able to do it. That goes to that internal speak, right? That family in the head that's telling you these things. And then the other person that you're in the relationship with says and does things to foster your negative judgment and closed-mindedness, right? So they encourage those walls inside yourself. They encourage that lack of growth and staying low. And those are the things that we want to challenge and push back against. Now, some of these may have been really hard to hear and acknowledge and write down, but it's important for your growth that you do it. And you may need to listen to this video a few times to get through it, or go through it a few times and do the exercise at various times throughout the year, right? And as your relationship progresses, it can be really important to do that. And when you look at what you wrote down, did you end up with more on the me column or the other person column? Or was it both? Knowing if it's a toxic interpersonal or intrapersonal relationship or not can help you to determine if changes need to be made to the relationship or if it's time to end the relationship with the other person and really get into strengthening that relationship you have with yourself and detoxify it. Well, let's talk about what to do about a toxic relationship with yourself or someone else. First, if you have an internal toxic relationship, you have to join your own team. Don't be your own worst enemy. Encourage and fight for yourself to be well and engage in adaptive and healthy behaviors. Learn adaptive strategies to build yourself up and encourage your own growth. Therapy can be a great place to do this, and I know a lot of folks can't afford therapy or struggle with it. That's why I've made these books back here, right, so that maybe that they can help you too. And hopefully these videos have helped you do that as well. So it's therapy, it's workbooks that help you, it's these videos or videos that help you grow and develop and enhance that positive sense of self so that you can challenge those negative aspects. And I think that we really have to, join our own team. And I think with others, think about how you can align with them. How can you align with that other person, right, in your life who's so important? And what can you do to make it work? If you stop and think about your relationship with that other, whoever was in that column, right? What can you do to make that relationship work? Recognize that some relationships with others just aren't going to work. And this means you have to weigh your costs and benefits to stay or go. And I know that that's tough. I know that that's hard. And when you talk about change, is the other person willing to take you seriously, work in your best interest, or are they only interested in their own? It's an important assessment to make on every relationship, and to be able to discuss it, how you feel, and genuinely look at that with an authentic view. Don't let that BPD lens distort your perception of self and other. We want to push back against that. We want to see the authenticity in the relationship and in yourself. Now, can you both join the common goal of growth or not? Realizing the relationship is toxic and that the other person is not willing to help and expects only you to do the work, or they're happy with the status quo of you being belittled, neglected, and shamed, illustrates that toxicity, and you need to go back to the cost and benefit analysis. This is tough for people with BPD due to abandonment fears, rejection sensitivity, and often low sense of self-worth. The illogical but common thought that no one will ever love me perpetuates so many individuals with BPD, and it is oftentimes this fear, and it keeps folks locked in to those maladaptive BPD beliefs, behaviors, and patterns. And you have to recognize and deal with the internal toxic relationship first. You have to heal inside. Then your power is marshaled, right, to make those long-term changes. Now, I'm not going to tell you to stay in a toxic relationship, and I'm not telling you that at all, right? I'm saying explore inward. Know that you deserve compassion and kindness, and have people in your life that treat you with respect and want you to grow. That's what these videos are about. That's what I'm trying to convey to these thousands and tens of thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands. I don't know, be nice, right? But, right, that's what I'm trying to do, for you to get that sense that there is someone out there. That's what these videos are for, to help you build that sense of self-respect, build that sense of compassion to help you grow and develop and manage that BPD. And the lessening of the internal toxic relationship is the first critical step. It's so important. And therapy is a great place to do this. And couples therapy, right, can also be great for you and your significant other to learn how to do your relationships differently. Now, I really hope that this video was helpful for you. Please leave any comments about it or what you've done. Not only work on yourself, but also in those relationships that you have, and what have you done to help detoxify your relationships. So like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for your attention. Please take care. Bye-bye.